Our Positively Rural webinars are quarterly, and they've been going right through the pandemic now, and it's just a really wonderful opportunity for us to come together and to hear from some experienced practitioners, but also to share our stories and our experience of missioning in a rural context. And we're really thrilled today to be welcoming our own Carla Quenet. You usually see Carla doing the introductions, but she's going to be sharing with us today about mental health and mental ill health. And Bridget, who is also a learning network officer in the Southwest region. And she is a real farmer living on a farm. She can see everything going on out of her window, and she's going to be sharing from her lived experience. And having spent a few days on Bridget's farm last summer, I can tell you it is a very busy working farm, and the whole family get involved. So it's really great to have her with us today. And I will pass over to Bridget to share our opening devotion.
Good morning, everyone. It's so lovely to be here, and thank you for asking me. Over the last couple of months, I've been reading this book, The English Pastoral, an incredible book. Just with so many moments that you go, yes, that's right, that's how rural is. And I love it. And when I was thinking about devotions this morning, the book talks very much about that rhythm of life that we have as farmers are working the land. We see the rhythm of life there in our fingertips every day, whether that be the dry soil and dust of today, or the yucky mud and other unpleasantries in the rain. Actually, the seasons, those moments when you are with God, but you feel, whether you have faith or not, that you are with the universe at those times. The seasons are so important, and today we will be discussing and unpacking the seasons of life, the seasons of emotion that we all feel. And so I found this lovely prayer that I want to share with us as we start this morning. It's from this old gem. I would imagine most of you have this on your bookshelf at some point, and probably may have sent it on to the charity shop by now. It's that old, but it has some real gems in it. So can I invite us to pray? God of change, you who gave us the seasons, ups and downs, days and nights, life and death, growth and decay, we are glad you do not insist that we are static, immovable like concrete. Instead, you made us for variety, for response, to act and react to change around us, not as unfeeling, but as real people. So we thank you for the swing of moods and the surge of feelings, for both the highs and the lows, for rocket flight of joy and dark basement of despair. You understand when life gets on top of us, when we hit rock bottom. You understand when tiredness bends us until we snap. You understand when we are frustrated, hurt, or just plain fed up. And we are relieved that it is then, when we need you most of all, that you do not fold your arms looking down your nose and insist that we display the right feelings before you accept us. But you take us instead, you hold us, you undo the straps of pain and frustration and let them fall at your feet. So we bring all to you, Lord, knowing that you care, and look to you for the strength to continue this day and every day. Speak words of peace and give us rest. Amen. Amen. I think I'm handing over to Carla.
Thank you, Bridget, and it's great to be sharing with Bridget this morning as we focus on mental health and the farming community. So in chat or in your real voices, if you prefer to take yourself off mute, what would you say if I said to you, what is mental health? What is mental health? Pop it in chat or say it aloud. The ability to function normally, feeling balanced, the balance of emotions, well-being, creating well-being. Well-being. Thank you. Keep adding them in if you like. A definition of mental health is that mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is about how we feel, how we think, how we behave, how we cope with the ups and downs of life, how we care for ourselves, our self-esteem, and our confidence. We all have mental health, and it's important that we find ways of keeping our mental health good. Some of you may recall the No Health Without Mental Health in 2011, where the government produced a mental health strategy in which it emphasised a relationship between mental health and physical health. The strategy helps us to better understand how mental health is everybody's business. It focused on treatment objectives, early intervention, reducing inequality, and relapse prevention. There's also that desire to reduce stigma and discrimination. So we've looked a little bit about what is mental health. What would you say if I said, what is mental ill health? What is mental ill health? Sorry, what is mental ill health? What would you say if I was speaking about mental ill health? What would you think I was speaking about? Fed up, yeah. Making harmful choices for ourselves and others, various forms of depression, inability to step away and taking that kind of terrible revenge, inability to function as you wish. Thank you. Mental health issues are common. We will reflect on the impact of mental health in a few moments, but it's interesting to reflect that through the course of all our lives, it's highly likely that either we ourselves or somebody that we know will have some form of mental ill health. That's because statistically, 1 in 4 people have mental ill health in a given year. Yet despite mental ill health being so prevalent in society, sadly, there's still a huge amount of stigma and discrimination associated with it. For some people, it's a fear of what the impact of a diagnosis might have on their employment. For others, it's a fear because they don't understand what mental ill health is, and that fear of how others might behave. If an individual is fearful because of their own diagnosis or ashamed of health, then that could lead to a delay, indeed never getting any help or support that they need. We know that early intervention can aid recovery, and recovery is a really important theme within mental health. We recognise the real hope of recovery. Situation, isn't it? We're going to watch a video. This video is by Mind. Mind are a phenomenal organisation. And if you ever need some information around various forms of mental ill health, then they've got all sorts of things on their websites, which helps us to better understand. Young Minds is also very, very good as well. So I'm hoping I might be able to play this video. But But there we go. Apologies. Approximately 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a mental health problem each year. Mental ill health is responsible for 72 million working days lost and costs £34.9 billion each year. £34.9 billion each year. In England, 1 in 6 people report experiencing a common mental health problem, such as anxiety and depression, in any given week. 1 in 6 people. People with a long-term mental health condition lose their jobs each year, around double the rate of those without mental health conditions. This equates to about 300,000 people, the equivalent of the population of Newcastle or Bristol. 70 to 75% of people with diagnosable mental illness receive no treatment at all. Men aged 40 to 49 have the highest suicide rates in the UK. To me, these are startling statistics, and they really bring home the impact that mental ill health has in our society, and brings home the likelihood that we're going to bump into mental health either in our own lives, in the lives of our loved ones, or in our communities. I don't know which one of those statistics stuck out to you today. I'm not going to ask you to respond, but just ponder and percolate those statistics for a moment. And as you do, we're going to go into breakout groups. Breakout groups will be facilitated, and you're invited to discuss the question which I'll introduce in a moment. But first, please, within your breakout groups, mental health, ill health is a really sensitive matter. So please ensure your own safety. Only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Answer the part of the question you feel comfortable with. There's no obligation to answer them all. And do share learning from your small group, but don't share other people's stories. That's their story to share. And do, if you want, come back to the main room, leave the breakout room if you're finding the conversation difficult or triggering. Our greatest concern today is that your safety is paramount. So having done the kind of safety notice, I want you to, in your breakout groups, to think about this following questions. In what ways have you noticed mental ill health impacting on any of these next groups? Your community, your church, yourself. In what ways have you noticed mental ill health impacting your community, your church, yourself? What helpful or positive examples have you experienced in relation to responding well to people with mental health? So where have you noticed it, and what positive examples are you aware of responding well to mental ill health? So we're going to have some time in breakout rooms now, about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll call you back and we'll give you a warning. So Catherine's going to break us into our breakout rooms now. Thank you, Catherine. Does anybody want to feedback anything from their small group in response to the questions, in particularly kind of the positive examples? No pressure, we just wanted to give you opportunity.
Carla, we ended with two wonderful positive examples. We shared a little bit about the sadness and what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
The two positive examples were given. One was about a church that is that, Tracy, I hope you don't mind me calling you in here, is that all right? Because it was just so exciting. It was quite a big project, wasn't it?
That's fine, yeah, happy to share. So some of you have heard before about Malham Chapel and the work that was done there, but one of the members of our community there is involved with Childline and has connections with the Samaritans. And unfortunately, we know at Malham there's a lot of suicides, unfortunately, that happen in the area. She's been working with them to look at the local community, engage in the national park and the police and other authorities and members of the community to see what we can do. And she's basically liaising with all of those to increase the signage in the area. And has now got the Samaritans to offer some free training to people in the community. So we've become kind of the centre of organising all of that. And we're looking at putting a free phone in as well, so that hopefully people will come to the chapel if they're worried and stop. And maybe just that phone call or that information will kind of prevent some of this going on.
That's a brilliant example. Thanks, Tracy, for sharing that. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, the other one was really exciting because it was specifically aimed at men.
Okay.
Again, it wasn't my story, so I don't know whether the person who told it wants to share it or not. Are you happy to share it?
Yes, yeah. It's Tim here from Silsden. Just something prompted by the walking I do. I'm a regular walker and I walk on the moor near home every day. And during the pandemic, I met quite a large number of men who walk on their own. And because we met regularly, because we're all walking at the same time, we started to talk to each other. And I found a lot of them are on their own and they're carrying a burden of bereavement or illness or looking after a relative. And then someone's opened a small cafe in a hut where a few of us stop and we have a coffee. And one or two of them remarked that this is the only time I speak to anybody else. Mm-hmm. So it made me think, now that we're coming out of the pandemic, why don't we meet in our church building where we can make soup and just have a couple of hours together? At the moment it's once a month, and the group's evolving a little bit, but about 20 have come each time, which is enough for us to cope with. And it's free of charge, but donations are welcome. And so far, I've had £76 and £63 each time. So it's I can pay for the ingredients that we need and some cakes and a few bits and bobs, and I have some left over. I'm just hoping it'll keep growing, and I'd like the group to evolve really into people that need to come and benefit from coming. 3 elderly gentlemen came from a care home a week ago with a carer, and it was fantastic because otherwise they don't see anybody else really. So
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. That's really helpful. That's a really helpful example, and how it can kind of, just bumping into folk can develop into a really helpful group for folk to meet together. So thank you, Tim. It feels really organic and it feels really doable. I think we've got time for one more story if anybody wants to share.
Perhaps I could share what I shared in my group, which was because I'm immunosuppressed, I've been shielding and still am shielding, and still working, as hard as I ever were. And one of the things I've noticed about this is significant isolation, which is really hard when you're used to being somebody who does all kinds of stuff, having to rearrange your life, literally. And the positive that came out of it is I created a diocesan group for both clergy and laity who are in the same boat as me. And we can get together and share in our ideas and stories and different technologies to how we can continue to do what we do.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Valerie. That's really helpful. We're focusing on rural ministry, and today we're focusing around mental health and mental ill health within the farming community. 84% of farmers under 40 believe mental health is the biggest danger facing the industry, up from 81% in 2018. That's according to the Farm Safety Foundation in 2020. There was a study done, and I'll show you the front cover there, around mental health in the farming community. And it was recognised that loneliness was found to be, in the study, to be linked to mental health problems such as depression and anxieties. For those of you who are very familiar with the farming community, it won't surprise you that that was as a result of long hours, working alone, and a feeling of being undervalued and disconnected from wider public, among some of the key factors which cause loneliness within the farming community. So mental health is found in all areas of community, and today we focus upon mental health in the farming community. And it's a real delight to welcome Bridget, who has lived experience of working on a farm, living on a farm, helping on a farm, doing all things farm related, and connecting with her wider farming community. So Bridget, please share with us some of your experience now.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen, if that's okay, to give my some context as to who I am, really. So there's me and the tribe. Very much deliberately worded there. I'm married to Kevin, who is a farmer. We both trained in youth ministry 20 odd years ago. I know I don't look old enough, but we did. So Kevin was brought up on the very farm that we are on. He is the 7th generation of Downs to farm here, though the tribe there are the 8th generation to be here, with no pressure on them apart from that which is external upon them to continue farming, and we'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, we farm here 170 acres of our own land, and then odd bits here and there of other land. We farm beef, and we have arable crops that make us self-sustaining. But yeah, Kevin is the 7th generation, and whilst we were away working in youth ministry, Kevin felt very much that we needed to be back on the farm, especially as the children started to come along, and actually it was a very wise decision, because it really is our identity. It is running through our blood, the rural living, and it's important. In 1855, Aaron and Jane, the first of Kevin's descendants, arrived here at Smitham Farm, and there's a more up-to-date picture of Kevin, his parents, us, and Kevin's sister. Over those years, farming has changed well, unrecognisably in so many ways. You know, the UN says that 5 million people move from out of rural locations and into urban locations every year. 5 million people. And actually here in Great Britain, that happened, you know, maybe 2 or 3 generations ago. And so there's less people here. And farming has changed across that time. But actually, we still farm the same crop. So this is triticale. I don't know if any of you farm triticale or you have this as your landscape during the summer. But this is used for thatching reed. And certainly in that previous photo that you saw, that is a similar crop. And we farm it exactly the same nowadays, but using tractors rather than horses to dray it in. But very much a labour, some task, of which actually we are not able to grow the crop this year. We weren't able to grow the crop last year because of the lack of people willing to come and help and to work for us. We've always relied on European workers to come, seasonal European workers, because our British working crew, they don't like it, it's too hard. Which is really interesting, really interesting. So actually it's really sad, because actually since 1855 that crop has grown here on the farm, and in the recent years it hasn't. I do believe that Kevin has plans to bring it back. The rest of us are not too sure about this, but it's all good. It's all good. You know, when you look at that picture of our landscape, you can see there, that just looks serene, doesn't it? That, you know, that the crop is cut, it's stooked, that's what that's called, and often we'll have tea as the sun is setting in this sort of environment out in the field on that sort of day, and you can look around you, and the crop needs to stand like that to dry out for about 10 days, and actually at this moment there's almost a lull in the farm. And maybe Kevin and his father will then enjoy maybe some of the county shows and those types of things going on at that moment. But when we look across a field and we see it all like that, and it's sunny and nothing's blown down, you think everything is right with the world. What more would we ever want? The rural idyll is there in that photograph. But we know, because we all live in rural concern, that actually that's not the truth. That's not the whole story, is it? And I just wanted to share with you some of the things that really come to mind for me in certainly on my ministry in a rural context, but also from being a farmer's daughter. I was brought up on a farm too. It's just that I'm a second generation farmer. My dad chose farming after a career in racing car driving. It came to and brought us up on the farm, farming Dartmoor ponies. So actually I've been around the farming community for a long time, involved with the charity work of the Farming Community Network, but also involved with young farmers, which I think has broadened my base of knowledge and just gives you the real insight to what goes on sometimes. So these are like my top 7. Sorry, 7 just seemed to be the number that I landed on. It's not particularly tidy. You draw your own conclusion to that, but I got 7 ideas as to the things that actually really bring down those around me, the things that I can see really affect mental health amongst the farming community. But I want to broaden this. I want to broaden this to actually those living in a rural community, because so often when I'm asked to speak at things, yes, it's because I'm a farmer's wife, I'm sure. That's the only reason I'm ever asked. I'm the token farmer's wife. But also, it is also about actually rural understanding. I'm a parish councillor. And I can see from a broader context than just the farmers in our parish that some of these things really do affect them too, because actually rural communities are so tied together, often around the passages of times gone by, the landowners, that rhythm of all sorts of things that we'll come to in this list that I don't want to allude to right now. But actually, I think it's really important to see that actually some of the things that farmers have as problems and difficulties they face actually also affect others in the wider rural community. So the first one, the weather. Those joining with us first thing this morning heard me just say briefly about how it's dry here, and that is a problem. The corn went in 2 weeks ago, and we haven't had any rain since, and there's no rain for the next 10 days, the weatherman says. So actually that's stressing out a lot of people. And yesterday Barney, our youngest, came in and went, "Mum, do you know the weatherman says there's no rain for 10 days and that's a problem to Daddy?" I was like, yeah, that is a problem. But we've been here before. Often people will say that farmers are never pleased with the weather. I don't think that's true. I think often farmers will comment about the weather because they're right out in it, aren't they? They everything about the farming calendar is determined by the weather, and that those seasons I talked about in the prayer at the beginning, actually, everything is tied together with that. We see the years of plenty, we see the years of fallow, we see the years where actually you think, well, you did that by the skin of your teeth, but actually in all of those things you see that there is a season for harvest. And I can testify that I've definitely seen that. So the weather obviously gets people down. I can often see that on a really, really wet and windy day, not only are the humans around here fed up, but also the animals too. And that just lends to a moment of just feeling really dreary. And that can be really, really very negative. So yeah, we laugh about the fact that we're never pleased with the weather, but actually it really does impact people's health. And it's really important that the spring comes, and those that are sheep farming, certainly you're enjoying the sunshine right now. You might not enjoy it when the grass isn't growing in a few weeks' time, but actually you're enjoying it right now. The second one, Carla alluded to earlier about loneliness, and I think that's an ever-growing problem. If you think back to my slide of all of those men working the stooks and tossing them up onto the hay, cart, and actually you think about, actually nowadays in farming there are far less farmers actually on the land. When you look back to the censuses of this place in 1855, there was 7 dwellings, all with farm workers in them, and now you have 2 farmhouses with 3 workers in them, between them. And actually I think that says quite a lot about that increasing loneliness in farming. When I look at the farming around here and the farms and the way that they're made up, actually that's becoming an increasing problem because landowners are buying up land, and therefore farms are starting to turn to like holiday lets and things like that. So actually that problem is growing. I'm going to just hop to point 4 there, because in communities, in rural communities, we see that our communities are changing by their demographic. And so therefore you have closures of local meeting spaces. I was in a meeting recently and we were talking about mental health and actually how we can help. And one of the farmers in their early 30s said, since the closure of the local pub, he had felt that on Friday nights that used to be a real haven for him, not because of the alcohol, not because of the drink, but because actually after a heavy week You knew that you could go there with friendly faces, the locals, and actually now he didn't have that. And I think that is so true, isn't it? But it's not just the pubs, because we have to recognise that that's not a healthy place for everyone. But actually the closure of local meeting spaces in general is a problem to the mental health of people in rural communities. And I think that's something that maybe the church could be thinking about. I love Tim's thoughts about, Tim, that lunch that you're doing. I think you said it was a lunch. There's a local Methodist chapel here that started something very similar about 3-4 years ago. And I remember my mum, who attends that church, said, you never guess what, but Yvonne never realized that Edna was still living in the community. They went to the same primary school 60 years ago, had lost touch, but not actually realized that they lived 3 miles away from each other, because they were down 2 different roads. So, and 2 different roads around here where you could be miles, you could be in different districts. But actually, they joined together at the soup and sweet, as they call it. And to that moment, that they said, oh, let's do coffee. Let's get together. And I think that's so important, isn't it? So Tim, yeah, I love anything like that. I think that's really important. Point 3 is relationship breakdown, that heritage pressures. I think that has to be amongst the top when you're speaking to young farmers. Anything about succession planning, about the way that you relate with dad and mum, about the way that farming's going to go in the future. But actually, when you're in the coalface and when it's raining or when it's really dry, or the cows haven't made the price that they should have, and you've not actually broken even, or you can't get rid of your pigs because there's no slaughtermen left, or how are we actually going to bring the silage in, because that's going to cost a lot of fuel. So where are we going to get the fuel from? Or actually our silage isn't going to grow because the fertilizer costs. Those types of moments, that pressure that you face, can really, it takes a strong marriage to survive farming life. And actually, I think that it's really important, and I think people need to be talking about that. But as the church, how can we help that? How can we support that? How can we help people when they're facing that? I think is a really good question, and a question that the church should be asking itself, instead of standing back and going, oh, you never guess what, but Paul's run off with somebody else, or Sharon's decided that farming's enough and moved on to the next village. Instead of gossiping about that, what are we doing about that? Because that really does happen a lot. And it's something that is really, really very obvious in our community right now. I think one of my cousins is the chair of the NFU for the Southwest or Devon. I can't remember, but he's like a big cheese. And we were chatting not long ago with Richard Teal, actually, when Richard Teal came down, Richard Tucker, who is my cousin, and I met with Richard Teal, and we were just discussing about the pressures on farmers and on the farming community. And Richard brought up point 5 as like the leading one for him, as to a problem that he faces, and actually he was like, you get really down because of public perception. And that's then fueled by the government schemes that are coming in, and the way that that's all driven is problematic. And yeah, I can see that my husband Kevin several Sundays ago went out and took a big bag of corn that he had grown here on the farm, laboured and toiled over it, and a government scheme is suggesting that we need to feed our wild birds more. I'm a little bit negative about that, because actually the birds have so much to feed on here, but hey, and just literally tipped the bag of corn out on the ground. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, well, this is a government scheme, this is where the public want farming to go, and that moment almost broke both of us, of that, whoa, this is big and this is real, and this is on a tiny scale compared to some. I've alluded to market prices, you know, on that day when you get to market, and I'm just going to talk about that very briefly in a minute. I realise I'm running out of time already. The rising costs on fertiliser and fuel, that is going to be major, and coming forward, you know, our food costs are going to go up. There's no doubt about that. And then there's that hidden reality of housing in rural communities. Actually, there is very little housing in rural communities that's affordable to the farming community. And I think we need to be really honest about the amount of people living in a homeless situation, sofa surfing in our rural communities right now. And Debbie, when you were talking about your church closures in the chat just a minute ago, you know, I want to be challenging the church to look at, when we close churches, what can we do about affordable housing in rural locations? Because ultimately, this is where all those emotions come. It's to the market ring on market day, and anybody involved in market chaplaincy, I just think you're incredible, because you watch out for the edges, you watch out for that day that you think, actually, that person's really struggling, they need something extra, and you're aware of that. You can see the highs and lows in life, you can see who's missing, and often you will drive down that bumpy track to go and see them if they've not been at market. And I think we need to be behind our market chaplains. They are so really very important. Why do we do all of this? Sadly, during the pandemic, we lost 5 people to suicide during the pandemic from the West Devon area. This is Matt, and this is how we celebrated his life. Was a young person in our church. Suicide's real. In farming communities, we experience it, unfortunately, a lot. And 5 during COVID was a lot, and it was because of the pandemic. It was because all sorts of reasons why these things happened. But I think the reality is that we need to get better about talking about the things we're talking about today, and the reasons and the responses of the church. We can make a difference. And this is a tractor run. If you've never come across a tractor run before, you're lucky. You've never got stuck behind one. But it was great to see the farming community come out and say, you know, enough is enough. We're going to talk about these things. It's okay to say that. And all these amazing organizations all run all sorts of support for people at those times when they are in really dark moments. But actually when people are experiencing those dark moments, they often won't feel that they can talk. So we as the church, we as people that are involved in ministry or pastoral work or just concern for people in rural communities, we need to be there. We need to be looking out. Like I said, on market day, on the edges, has that person not turned up? Have we closed something that used to mean that that person could talk to others? And are we going to go that extra mile down that bumpy farm track to go and find them? Because I think that is rural ministry, that is rural chaplaincy, that is rural, because we know each other. Let's look out for each other. I'd just like to say that each of these organisations have incredible videos out on YouTube on mental health. And so I just champion that you look at those. So thank you for listening to me witter on. I think you've got a break now for 5 minutes. I hope I haven't taken off your break. I think it's important to have a break, and then we will resume in about 5 minutes time, Carla.
Welcome back. People start joining us again. If you've got anything you'd like to feed back, particular ideas of help to bring ideas into fruition, please bob those into chat. Welcome back, everybody. It's good to see you here. If you are not on mute already, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that'd be really helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback, but we'll do that via the chat function. Particular ideas that you would find helpful to bring ideas into fruition, that'd be really great to see those, and so that we might be able to best respond to those. So Bridget spoke about the need to be able to speak about mental health issues, and one of the tools that we can use to do that, to help reduce stigma and discrimination, is mental health first aid. Just give me a wave if you've ever heard of mental health first aid. No, some people have, some people haven't. It's a mixed bag. Even when we deliver the courses, there's a mixed bag of people who've heard of it before they've even signed up to the course. Let me just share screen with you. So mental health first aid is like physical first aid. It helps provide individuals to provide support when someone is experiencing a mental health issue before professional help is available. Like first aid, physical first aid, it doesn't make them a medic or a psychiatrist or a therapist, but it helps people to signpost people better. Through improved understanding, honing non-judgmental listening skills, and knowing when, how and where to signpost people with mental health, a mental health first aider is better placed to help people. Let me share with you a video which will introduce in a succinct way what mental health first aid is.
In the salon, I have all sorts of conversations. We're dealing with people one-to-ones all day, every day. We're in a very unique position of trust, so people often open up to us.
It's so important in society to be aware about mental health, because we all have mental health. As a teacher, I've always wanted to help young people, but I've not always known how to do that. That's why I took the Youth Mental Health First Aid course.
Working in the police could be very challenging work. Well, mental health first aid training gives you the knowledge and the skills to signpost someone to get the help that they might need.
In my role as talent leader, I see the amount of pressure that people are under in our high-performance culture. I thought it would be a really useful thing for me to do, to understand the effects of that pressure on our people.
We're trained on health and safety all the time, and this is the perfect addition to that training.
Mental Health First Aid England offers courses for all industries and specifically focuses on providing initial help for co-workers, families and friends.
The two-day mental health first aid course gave us the confidence and the ability to react in the correct way when people are talking to you about their mental health.
In the police, it's really helped us to recognise when somebody might be experiencing mental ill health and for us to know what to do next.
The training's personally helped me being able to approach individuals, not just to ask them how their day's going, but to really talk to them and to offer some support.
Just a week after I'd completed the training, a pupil came to me with suicidal feelings. Having done the training, I was in a position to calmly respond to that situation. It's an incredible feeling to know that you've done something to help a young person who's struggling.
Mental
health
First
Aid
England.
You're on mute, Carla.
You're on mute, Cara.
I'm evidently having one of those mornings. Apologies. Mental Health First Aid is an internationally recognised training course which teaches people how to spot the signs and symptoms of mental health and provides help on a first aid basis. There's now over 3 million people around the world in 2009, having been first developed in Australia. Mental Health First Aid doesn't teach you how to be a therapist, but it does teach you how to listen, to reassure, to respond even in a crisis. Mental Health England courses are for anyone aged 16 upwards. The adult version of the course, there is a youth version. Mental Health First Aid England courses are delivered by a assured instructor member who has attended instructor training programs and is accredited trained to keep people safe and supported while they learn. I myself am an instructor and leading courses around mental health is a real privilege. The 2-day Mental Health First Aiders course is a real a brilliant course in my mind, and the connection in the Methodist Church has trained 11 people to deliver the 2-day course. We also have 2 people who are trained to deliver the youth course. Mental Health First Aid course is retailed at £300, but the Methodist Church is able to offer it across the connection and to our community partners for £50 because of the investment that they've made in the training. So it's an online course, 4 sessions for 2.5 hours with e-learning, or it is delivered in person in 2 days, 9 till 5. This 2-day course provides practical skills and awareness designed to give participants a deeper understanding of mental health and the factors that can affect a person's well-being, including your own. It gives practical skills to spot the triggers and signs of mental health issues. It gives confidence to step in, to reassure and to support a person in distress, enhanced interpersonal skills such as non-judgmental listening, knowledge to help someone recover their health by guiding them through the next steps and signposting them. We're not there to give advice, we're there to give support. And the Learning Network calendar has the courses that are currently running listed. So the main topics that are covered in a mental health first aid course is the action plan about mental health, depression, suicide, substance misuse, anxiety disorders, self-harm, eating disorders, personality disorders, psychosis, and building a mentally healthy community. I think it's a really, really great course, and it's one way in which we can grow confidence to be able to speak openly about mental health, which Bridget alluded to would be a really phenomenal thing. If we can get our community speaking of mental health and mental ill health, then we could offer support even better than we're doing now. So I thought it was helpful to share with you one tool that has been offered by the church at present, because I think lots of people are finding the course helpful, being used within industry, and I think it'll be used really well within the life of the church too. We have a moment or two for any questions, but literally a moment or two. But I know that Bridget and I are both willing to take questions after the session as well. But if anybody's bursting with a question now, we wouldn't want to stop you. In which case, Positively Rural is a part of a series, and Lorraine is going to tell us about our next event.
Yes, I really want to encourage you to accept the invitation that you will receive for our next Positively Rural gathering, which is on the 14th of July. Our guests next time will be Doctors Debbie Clayton and Dr. Jenny Mercer from Cardiff Met University. They're both doctors of psychology, and they have an interest in the natural world and how it affects our health and well-being. They have recently evaluated a project in Monmouthshire that specifically worked with people recovering their mental well-being. So they're going to share some of their findings and their knowledge with us, and hopefully they will have a PhD student with them who has just completed a study with bees and how beekeeping can help our mental well-being. So I think it follows on quite well from this one, and our hope is that it will encourage us to consider ways that we can minister and how we can be proactive and helpful with the resources that we have access to, be that we have a church woodland, or maybe we just have a hanging basket, but maybe we have resources that we can help. And I'm hopeful that our next one will continue nicely from this one and inspire us and be interesting and stimulating. So do come along. We'd look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Jane. In conclusion to our session, Elizabeth's going to lead us closing prayers.
I'm going to start with a Psalm Reduct by Carla Quenet. This is Psalm 23. This I know, my life is in your hands. I have nothing to fear. I stop, breathe, listen. Beneath the whirl of what is a deep down quiet place. You beckon me to tarry there. This is the place where unnamed hungers are fed, the place of clear water, refreshment. My senses stilled, I drink deeply, at home in timeless territory. In peril, I remember death's dark veil holds no menace. I lean into you. Your eternal presence comforts me. I am held tenderly. In the midst of all that troubles, threatens and diminishes, you set abundance before me. You lift my head, my vision clears, the blessing cup overflows. This I know, you are my home and my hope, my strength and my solace, and so shall you ever be. Let's pray. Lord, sometimes pain sweeps over me, pain of limbs, pain of heart. There is heaviness in movement and thought. But why am I telling you this? You already know and are bearing it with me, enabling me to carry on, blessing me with your strength and love. Amen.
Amen.